Fellow Zimbabweans, I come to you in circumstances of extreme national emergency. We have an extraordinary situation in our country. We are facing an extremely challenging national outlook. The COVID-19 pandemic is wreaking havoc in every family, every hamlet, every village, every suburb, and in every community. But remember, every COVID-19 statistic is a human being. Every other day, we are losing another friend, another workmate, another relative, another leader, or another Zimbabwean. Just as of yesterday, Zimbabwe recorded beyond a 1,000 mark of deaths. We have now recorded 1,075 deaths to date. Our figure for those who have tested positive is to date over the 30,000 mark. My condolences to those who have lost their loved ones. My condolences to those who are in mourning. We also continue to pray for those who are not feeling well. Get well soon. Our God is able. You will be healed. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Let us at this juncture observe a minute of silence in honor of our dear departed. Fellow Zimbabweans, COVID-19 poses a serious challenge, a serious threat to our existence. It may threaten our national security and collective public safety if not handled with astuteness and statesmanship that is required. It can be business as usual. A catastrophe of this magnitude is now staring us in the face. If we don't do something, if we don't act in an extraordinary manner, the situation is going to get worse and even out of control. We can correct this situation only if we get our act together as a people and begin to think together, to work together, to walk together, and make sure that in togetherness we define a collective future. You remember that on the 30th of January 2020, the Director General of the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus disease COVID-19 outbreak a public health emergency of international concern under the International Health Regulations of 2005. Zimbabwe reported its first official COVID-19 case on the 20th of March 2020. Since then, a lot has happened, a lot has been done, and of course we have had stories to tell. We appreciate the various initiatives by different stakeholders and government. The response of the Ministry of Health in particular and the government in general is noted and appreciated. Various initiatives have been instituted to ameliorate and improve the situation. In this regard, we salute our warriors, our nurses, our doctors, our healthcare workers, who have been standing and outstanding as a battalion of patriots, as national zealots, for their courage and ingenuity for our country. And we remain in debt to them and to their families. We thank you. We appreciate you. To their families, we thank you. You have given us soldiers. You have given us patriots and compatriots. We wish also to thank our environmental health professionals who are doing contact tracing, our port health officers, lab scientists who are running the tests, general hands who are cleaning the wards and housing the COVID patients, among many other healthcare workers. We also honor our police, military, our soldiers, prison and intelligence services, including all those who are offering essential services in various sectors. We salute our information and communication practitioners, the media, our journalists, for the great work in spreading the information on COVID-19 and keeping the nation informed on this deadly pandemic. We wish to thank our international community across the globe, the United Nations, the EU, the USA, the UK, and China, among many other countries that have continued to play a pivotal role to work with us hand in glove and work with us shoulder to shoulder to make sure that we deal with this pandemic. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, fellow countrymen, to also thank our neighboring countries, in particular South Africa, Botswana, Mozambique, Malawi, and Zambia, for bearing the burden of diaspora citizens on our behalf. We thank you. We also wish to thank our wonderful citizens in the diaspora. You have done us proud. We thank those who have been donating PPEs, those who have been assisting hospitals, particularly in Mulawayo, Matebele and South, Kwekwe, Chitungwiza, Wange, to mention but a few. I've taken note of your efforts. It has come to my attention that you continue to assist your country. Thank you. I'm glad for the great effort that is being done by these citizens, and I'm hoping that it will remain so. I'm also happy that it's not being politicized. There is no partisan agenda. This kind of effort cannot be reduced to partisanship. We also want to thank you, the individual volunteering citizens who have been exceptional in creative ways to help citizens, to help Zimbabweans. The Exileni project that has created a quarantine center is also a case in point. We have seen the projects in Harare by individual citizens, corporates, and those who are coming from a humanitarian perspective. Thank you for your selfless service and sacrifice. Let me also thank the people at home. Let me thank you all, my fellow countrymen. You are exceptional. You are wonderful people, Zimbabwe. The great Zimbabwean people, you never fall short. You never fail. You never fall. We want to thank you. You have done us proud. Although the virus is as bad, I know that given the state of our healthcare system, things could have been very bad and worse, but you have remained consistent. I want to thank you. You, the people of Zimbabwe, you have acted as our National Reserve Guard Force against the pandemic. Made sure you mask up. You have made sure you exercise and practice social distancing. You are sanitizing. You are praying. And you have continued to remind each other, out of patriotic duty, to wear masks and also to do things that are supposed to be done properly. We are each other's keeper. We are each other's protector. We thank you all, the peace-loving citizens, our hard-working Zimbabweans, for the love, care, and amity. We also thank you for everything that you have done for each other, for one another, and for all who are in the country and in the diaspora. We also want to thank God, our God the Almighty, for the providence and preservation. Although, of course, the approach of the central government has been deficient in a number of ways, in several key areas, we choose not to play politics over this very important matter with this very serious issue. We have steered clear of finding fault or blame gaming. The objective underlying this proposed plan against COVID is to offer a palpable, credible, viable alternative policy framework to the manner in which the government has approached COVID-19 response to this extent. We posit and propose this policy mix and alternative plan to shed light on how citizens, development partners, and the regional community can work together in driving a more coordinated response to save lives, protect livelihoods, prevent our economy from collapsing. On top of borrowing from global experience and best practice, the global standard, the best scientific evidence, we suggest a uniquely Zimbabwean response that is customized and tailored to the circumstances, competencies, and capabilities of our great nation. COVID-19 emerging issues in Zimbabwe are multiple, but I will raise about 7 of them. The first one, the capacity of our health institutions. With COVID-19 cases almost tripling in the last weeks, our hospitals are overwhelmed, failing to cope with the number of COVID-19 infected patients, requiring our hospital admissions to be undertaken. We know that 10 to 15% of all cases will progress to severe illness, and approximately 5% of cases will become critically ill. This is according to the expert advice I got from our experts, because I consult doctors and medical practitioners on all these matters. The average daily cases over the past 2 weeks in Zimbabwe are around 700 cases. This means that between 70 to 105 people per day may progress to severe disease, which may require hospital admission. These numbers are too high for our health infrastructure to cope with. And as a result of our capacity to handle these severe cases of COVID-19, we seem to have been surpassed, resulting in suboptimal and in some instances non-existent emergency services for people with severe COVID-19. Parenya Atwa has had to increase COVID-19 wards this last week. This may be one of the reasons for the high death rates that we have seen and been witnessing over the past weeks. There is need to urgently increase the bed capacity in public hospitals so that patients with COVID-19 have access to oxygen therapy, as well as ventilators for those who are critically ill. The services that are needed have to be decentralized and become available in all our provinces and all our corners of the country. The situation is not good at all. Access to the bed and oxygen therapy must be more readily available across the country. But at the moment, our resources are strained. The second point on lockdown. Whilst we take the lockdown as a welcome initiative and move to try and minimize the rate of the spread of infections, there is need to effectively implement the lockdown. Studies have shown time and again that it is better to implement a short, sharp, but effective lockdown rather than a prolonged marathon lockdown, as compliance with lockdown regulations goes down with a prolonged marathon lockdown. The unavailability of social safety nets for the vulnerable, considering our heavily informalized economy, means that a lot of our people will be forced to breach lockdown regulations in search of food, water, survival, livelihoods, and even money to cater for their families. This again reduces the effectiveness of the lockdown. We must be careful not to flatten the economy in our bid to flatten the curve. We face the risk of a lockdown-induced poverty, which is actually a dangerous type of poverty. We do not want to impoverish our citizens. We need to nourish our citizens, uplift them, and make sure that we open opportunities for them at all material times. It is desirable and advisable to adopt other approaches to a lockdown. We could consider a partial lockdown instead of a holistic lockdown. A partial lockdown or a lockdown that is zonal or staggered, so that we do not just go into a one-size-fits-all. Lockdowns are not meant to be permanent solutions or a one-size-fits-all. There is need to create a lockdown exit strategy, but also a lockdown strategy that is viable and that is peculiar to our own circumstances. We reiterate, as a matter of emphasis, that contrary to the wholesale, unstructured, and panic-induced or driven shutdown, we would pursue an alternative path that saves lives, protects livelihoods, preventing our economy from collapsing, and saving our people from hunger. We believe that it is important. I'll go to the third point, that is an emerging issue, testing and screening. Our neighbors in South Africa have done a great job in trying to test and screen, just like what was done in Australia, in New Zealand, and other countries across the world. South-Africa have reported a new variant of the SARS-CoV-2 virus being named B.1.351. This strain has been shown to be more transmissible. It is more transmissible than the overall and original COVID-19 virus, with people coming into Zimbabwe for the festive season, which in my view was an error. We made a mistake because Christmas and the festive season was actually a super spreader. We could have used other methods to make sure that our borders were not porous and allow reports and not allow reports of invalid or fake COVID-19 certificates to wreak havoc in our communities. There is now a likelihood that that strain may have been imported from other countries. So we need to be able to deal with this. Health professionals are reporting difference in clinical presentations between the first wave and the current wave of infections, as well as the high rate of false negative results on PCR tests. This is an indicator that we might be dealing with a different strain of COVID-19 virus. There is need for us to conduct tests, or through the help of other countries like our neighboring South Africa and Botswana, if we cannot conduct the genetic testing of the virus to ascertain what type of virus we are now dealing with. Information is power. Facts are important. Facts are an advantage. We also welcome the availability of COVID-19 rapid antigen tests, which have been shown to be more reliable in detecting COVID-19 than the antibody tests. The tests are much more cheaper than the PCR tests. We need to increase availability of these tests across the country so that we can detect as much as possible, isolate those positive, and conduct tracing. This will slow down the rate of infections. Leadership is now required. We immediately demand the reduction of the cost of our health services. In fact, we must make it free for COVID-19 patients. People can't afford to be tested at $65 just for testing. People can't afford to be admitted into hospitals for $2,000 to about $5,000, especially in private hospitals, particularly for those who are in serious conditions. We must decentralize testing, and the rollout. Free testing to rural areas must be provided. Growth points, townships must be centers of testing, including all clinics and hospitals across our countries. Let me now turn to the fourth issue on health workers, their welfare, and their capacity. As you may know, our health workers have done a fantastic job, but they've done it under very extreme circumstances of hardship. We've been seeing our frontline workers fighting this pandemic. However, in order for them to effectively do their job, they need to be capacitated with the necessary tools of trade. According to the Health Service Board, over 1,500 workers, health workers, have already been infected with COVID-19, and 7 deaths have been recorded. This is sad, and may their souls rest in peace. The intermittent and chronic shortage of PPEs is one of the reasons why we have recorded this huge number of health workers getting infected. Recently, nurses at Salim Gabe Hospital were protesting over the shortage of PPEs. The situation is similar in other hospitals across the whole country, and more pronounced particularly in the countryside and in other hospitals in Mlawayo and also in Manicaland. PPE should be readily available in order to at least offer protection to our frontline workers. Shortage of health workers is a major reason why we have limited bed capacity for COVID-19 patients. We therefore cannot afford to continue losing health workers either through deaths or through absenteeism from work when infected health workers undergo their mandatory isolation periods. We need adequate remuneration as an incentive, including a risk allowance for our health workers. Our healthcare workers need support. They need our love. They need our comfort. They need national comfort from government. Number 5, the continuous care for other conditions in health. Whilst the attention and focus is on combating COVID-19 pandemic, there's need to continue providing care for other health conditions so as to avoidable morbidity and mortality from other illnesses. Recently, Parenyato Hospital announced that they are scaling down chemotherapy services, and also this is being seen at their radiotherapy center. This severely compromises access to care for cancer patients, as there are only 2 institutions in the public sector offering such important and vital services in the whole country. Measures need to be put in place to make sure that services for chronic conditions such as HIV, diabetes, hypertension, mental illness, as well as access to reproductive health and maternal and child care and health continue during the pandemic. We have experienced above normal rains, and floods this year are going to be a reality, and they are upon us. With the malaria season approaching, there's a likelihood of an increase in malaria cases. People should continue to access services in order to avoid deaths from malaria. As you know, malaria is a major killer in this country and on the African continent. Let me turn to the issue of super spreaders. Fellow countrymen, we have realized that funerals and congested places like prisons have become death zones. They have become serious super spreaders. Our prisons in particular have become COVID super spreaders, hotspots, and zones. This is an issue we need to address with immediate urgency and extreme and extraordinary fixity of purpose. Allow me, fellow Zimbabweans, to touch on an emerging issue on the COVID-19 vaccine rollout plan. We have realized that many countries in Europe, America, Asia have already begun discourse and even vaccinating their populations. In Africa, the vaccinations have not begun in earnest. Many countries, including South Africa and Kenya, have already placed orders for vaccines. While the country is said to benefit from this, the World Organization-backed COVAX scheme, as well as from the arrangements from the AU, these vaccines will not be enough, but also they are important to make sure that we test them before they are administered to our population. They may not be enough for the attainment of herd immunity, which is estimated to be at approximately 60%. There is need for the government to set aside for funds for the procurement of additional support. More importantly, it is necessary for Zimbabwe and indeed Africa to invest into research and development, into our own solutions, to provide homemade and homegrown solutions for our local people. Local solutions are always locally viable. We are a continent with great capacity in intellect, great capacity in our medicinal history and traditions to deal with any disease. We need to invest more in studying the mutating virus and also to avail the best solution which is safe for our people so that we don't just take lock, stock, and barrel solutions that are exogenous, solutions that are imposed on us. Zimbabwe needs to avail funds to development, manufacturing, and procurement of COVID-19 solutions. We have the brains, we have the expertise, we have the skills, we have the people. Our medical doctors are the finest across the continent and across the globe. All we need is to avail funds for them to do the researches within a short space of time. We must also avail funds for treatment of our communities, starting the process of identifying at-risk populations who are supposed to be treated with immediacy. Treatment being administered first to them. For any treatment plan to be effective, priority must be given to the elderly, the vulnerable, people living with disabilities, widows, orphans, and our frontline workers. Having said this, one would say, what is the way forward? Here is our humble submission of the way forward in the best interest of nation development and national contribution. Our national strategy, as far as we are concerned, must be predicated on 6 fundamental pillars. Number 1, there must be a broad-based, inclusive national task force that is composed of all the key stakeholders in our country. Number 2, we need an elaborate, time-tested testing, screening, isolation, and quarantining plan so that we don't just have people without even tracking mechanisms. I like the applications that have been used in Australia, in South Africa, where contact tracing is done through applications. We need to go digital and adopt ICTs. That is the future. We must start to have smart solutions to our challenges. Number 3, let us capacitate health institutions and the health workers, particularly our frontline workers. Number 4, let's have lockdowns that are targeted so that we just don't go into lockdowns as a matter of fashion or as a matter of responding to what other people have done. Let's be zonal, spatial, and targeted so that we isolate and target epicenters. Number 5, resourcing strategy. Through both domestic resource mobilization and our global appeals, we have many friends across the world who may be willing to help us. We need to reach out to them, not as beggars, but as people of goodwill and good standing, in good faith, for them to assist us. Number 6, we want to make sure that we start the unleashing of the 4th industrial revolution, the Internet of Things. This is very important. We must go e-government, e-health, and e-solutions. That is where the world is going, and we must be ahead of the rest because we are the best as Zimbabwe. The Internet of Things is a must. The Internet of Things at household level, in communities, in our schools, at our workplaces, because work styles and lifestyles are changing. And we need to make sure that the industrial revolution, particularly this 4th industrial revolution in information communication technology, is adopted. Karl Marx understood the factors of production, but he didn't understand that there was going to be the factors of communication. Gone are the days when just production was an issue. Now communication is important. The empires of the future, like what was said by Churchill, are the empires of the mind. We need to be ahead of the curve in this regard. Having said that, the following are immediate, and I hereby articulate them. There is need for us, as number 1, to deliberately have an approach that involves all players: political, labor, government, academics, churches, citizens, civil society organizations, private sector, so that we have a united team approach. Our traditional leaders, our war veterans, there has to be a one-team approach without even looking at the shade of political opinion or persuasion. We need to, secondly, establish a national COVID advisory group of experts and let science take the lead so that we have our experts leading from World Health Organization, but also those who are retired, who are very useful. And I know a lot of them whom I have been consulting, who have been helping. We also need to invite WHO and other experts, that is the World Health Organization experts, for an assessment and evaluation of our current national response, to identify gaps, to also understand the things that we need to sort out, to also understand where we have done right and where we need to improve. Number 4, we need, contrary to the current situation where citizens are on lockdown, which is almost like a breakdown with no testing taking place, government must roll out a national testing process by conducting door-to-door testing approach in the suburbs, in the townships, in the villages. That is the way to go. One would say, where are we going to get the resources? We have diamond, we have gold, we have our minerals, we have resources that we could say, because we have a national emergency situation, it can't be business as usual. Let's stop any other resource distribution in any other area and focus on fighting this deadly pandemic. Number 5, we also need to continue to fight the coronavirus using measures that must be considered, including, number 1, on this A, provision of personal protective equipment for our frontline staff such as nurses, doctors, janitors, administrative staff, police, soldiers, and state employees. B, the provision of at least a $2,000 risk allowance and tax exemption for all health professionals. We need to give them money to secure them, to protect them, to incentivize them, and also to make sure that we excite them into their patriotic duty. Our security servicemen and women and government workers on duty also need some incentives. We want to emphasize that in view of the disparities in the exchange rates, this must be paid in hard currency, hard cash, that is in the USD. C, we must provide sanitizers and masks for all, particularly those who are at duty, including our police officers and our military officers who will be manning our different zones and roadblocks. D, we must provide radio and TV lessons dedicated for the education of the masses about the coronavirus. Yes, we have done a lot on ZBC. We must continue to do more. And we must continue to increase so that there's frequency, there's also recence in effect in terms of what we are putting out there. E, in view of the rampant rampant corruption we have seen and the non-cooperation of certain players in government, which we have seen becoming a permanent feature under the Second Republic, we call upon government to ensure transparency and accountability in the handling of coronavirus issues by government. With input from all the stakeholders, we must come up with safety nets for the citizens during the lockdown, after the lockdown, to have elaborate measures aimed at containing the virus. Among the cushioning measures government should consider should include the rolling out of humanitarian support to the vulnerable people. This may include provision of cash handouts and subsidized basic goods such as meal, water, internet. And on internet, we need bundles for a lot of our people, a special envelope. And you know that we have money that is at the Universal Service Fund for infrastructure. We could redeploy this money to give support to our people so that they are able to accept these facilities. Electricity is important. Fuel is important. I know that in certain countries where I've looked at their practices, they've also given electricity coupons and vouchers to their citizens to cushion them against the vicissitudes, ups and downs of this pandemic. Fuel for our vulnerable groups who are most at risk, especially the elderly, need our support. Persons with disability, amongst others, need our support. Creation of a new model of informal sector trading where basic of commodities is undertaken at various levels to achieve decongestion, decentralization, and also to make sure that there is ensured sustenance in livelihood. As a matter of going forward, we also need, in line with stakeholders' consultation, government has to develop an information toolkit for the citizens with a view to create awareness on the progress made towards containing the virus. This information toolkit must, as a matter of must, be extensively disseminated through various channels, platforms, campaigns in the epicenters and hotspot areas. But we can't know the hotspot areas. Kana pasina kana kumbotesta, munhu anongofamba, kungoita kunge tiri kungopinda mujakajiriri. COVID haizive kuti wabvepi kana kuti unoenda kupi. Asi kana tikatesta zvinotiitira zvakanaka. So we need to make sure that we heighten the testing so that we locate these hotspots. The information toolkit must also provide specific details, such as the number of people tested per day, the outcomes of those tests, with the hope that this information can provide evidence-based leadership, evidence-based response, so that the country can show itself how we can cope with the disease and possible indication of how lockdown will at last be dealt with, so that we do not react, but we are proactive. For Zimbabwe, because of our context, we have over 5.7 million who are in the informal sector. It is important that we get the lockdown quickly out of our way so that we save lives from danger. Hence, the importance of reasonable statistical evidence on testing and the level of prevalence of the pandemic cannot be overemphasized. In view of the need to save lives from hunger, the coronavirus, and also saving the economy from total collapse, we need to come out with a lockdown and seal our borders safe for trade and come up with an organized strategy of returning back to work, which is almost like a back to work strategy with inputs from all the stakeholders, citizens included. There is need for the post-lockdown strategy that articulates how various sectors of the economy will be resuscitated and brought back to life, developed using a phased approach. This is what is needed, and we have developed a clear strategy which is available if government would want to care to also get our ideas. We believe in sharing ideas on how the economy can be rescued and be brought back to life. We have experts. Our economics team has done a fantastic job. Our health experts, the health department has done a fantastic job. They have developed papers on our post-COVID strategies to be able to respond to the economy and return back to work, and how children could also be brought back to school within the shortest possible of time. COVID has disrupted the education program and education timetable. This may take the form of making sure that we also have an approach that brings a back to life, a back to normal life roadmap. And we've done one that we are ready to share and to make sure that government develops one for the common good. In the interim, government must look at ways of looking at education by making sure that we also consult on teaching method that must be fully explored and scaled up using platforms such as the television, radio, and also dealing with the cost of data so that it is subsidized for our students who are supposed to benefit through online learning. In the rural areas, we need radio because online might not be a viable and credible strategy. There's also a need to explore using the television, and the role of ZBC is very important, especially radio and television through lessons. Radio lessons must help those in remote areas to have wide coverage. And we must also go an extra mile in consulting our teachers, our teacher associations, so that they give us the best approach on how we can teach our students during this pandemic. Solutions are always local. Solutions are always with experts and those affected most by the circumstance. So let's go to our teachers. Let's also consult our various teacher associations. Civil servants must also be allowed to work from home so that we decongest their places of work. We must go online. Civil servants must be given access to data, avail digital gadgets and services. They must also be encouraged to also continue to explore various application solutions that will help government to be on a smart platform. We must enforce fumigation of those workplaces that are supposed to be fumigated from time to time, because these are places that are usually high traffic in terms of concern and visit. There is need to marshal our resources for the countries that are in COVID circumstances. In our particular case, it must include budget recasting, budget viramenting, and making sure that we cut down government expenditure, especially on non-essential items. And I must emphasize, non-essential items, like luxury vehicles. We continue to see importation of expensive vehicles. Why should people in government be the ones who drive the most expensive cars? We don't want to see Lamborghinis. We don't want to see discoveries. We don't want to see Mercedes-Benz being driven by government officials. Yes, they need decent vehicles, but not expensive vehicles. Let's leave this kumbinga. Mbinga ndo zinoenderana nokudriva mota dzinodhura nokuti ndokubasa kwawo. Iswe hurumende toita basa rokushandira nyika so that we are not focused on trinkets and trappings of office. We must channel surplus resources to a COVID response. You are aware that we have had a lot of resources that could be channeled. That 2% could also be rechanneled to make sure that it supports all those who are supposed to be supported. We must also, as a matter of urgency, empty remand prisons. And of course, leave those very serious offenses. Give amnesty to those prisoners, except those on very serious charges. We need a plan to decongest our prisons. We need a plan to make sure that there's a strict regime of testing, screening, and isolating, and particularly disinfecting our prison areas. Let us also do one fundamental thing. Any country that does not speak to God is going to be in difficult jeopardy. We must allow our churches to open, provided that there's social distancing, there's testing, and there's also masking, with all the protocols that are supposed to be followed. When we pray, our God will hear us. When we seek the face of our God, He will not disappoint us. And we must thank God He has also provided providence and preservation for our country in difficult circumstances. Had it not been for God's envelope and canopy of grace, we would be somewhere. We still have figures. Yes, they are high, but they could have been higher. And we thank God for that. So we need our churches to play that pivotal role, to continue to speak to the Spirit, to continue to speak to the encouragement of our people, so that we do not lose the circumstance of an opportunity to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. There's also need to ensure that we pay attention to our economy and ensure that it survives the tide of the COVID pandemic. From a policy perspective, let us do the following, and I say this by concluding. It is important for us to improve the competitiveness of our exporters and eliminate exchange rate losses. The RBZ must allow banks to take full control of the foreign exchange trading to make sure that with a view to guarantee an efficient price discovery where the informal rate converges with the formal rate, or where disparities between the two rates are minimized to levels below 10%. Furthermore, whilst we understand the importance of sharing foreign currency as a scarce resource for national development services and purposes, the recently announced export retention of 40% in a period which is characterized by COVID-19 pandemic is reckless and also unacceptable. Yes, the drought of a stimulus package and of course over 30% disparities between the formal exchange rate and the parallel market rate is both regressive and inconsiderate. In view of this, we call upon the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe to reduce the export retention from 40% to 20%, to allow exporters to retain 80% of their export earnings. This is an important gesture to capitalize and also make sure that we stimulate our economy. Government failure to offer real stimulus package to serve businesses is a cause for great concern. It must be appreciated that both the 18 billion RTGS package for large business and the 600 million support to the SMEs are a drop in the ocean. This is so considering the fact that from our expert consideration, the funding that is required is in the region of 5 billion. In line with what we have said around consultation, we call upon government to come up with a reasonable package to serve businesses, small and large. Government should consider a number and a raft of fiscal measures aimed at reducing the tax burden for businesses, individuals, where appropriate. The following must be considered: an immediate removal of certain of the taxes that are not necessary. I look at tourism and mining. In tourism, we have 22 taxes. In mining, we have 15 taxes, respectively. And this should be dealt with to make sure that we also lighten the burden. In the long term, there's need for the post-COVID reconstruction and recovery program. This must take inputs from all stakeholders. Since the effects of COVID-19 are non-partisan, I want to implore each and every Zimbabwean to take this opportunity to be each other's keeper. We know the inadequacy of our system, the struggles of our collective being. However, now is the time to look at each other to ensure that we fight COVID-19 through our collective Ubuntu, our collective capacity, our collective historical competencies. Our brothers and sisters are dying. We are dying. We must wash our hands. We must mask up. We must keep our distance. No one is coming to save us. It is us. It is time we work together to stop the spread of this pandemic. Unity is key in the face of this pandemic. All of us must put aside our political jackets, remove our political robes, political differences, work together in the fight against COVID-19. It is not the time to score cheap political points. In fact, that scoreboard is not there. So we must work together as a matter of must. Let's forget this politicking and sloganeering. This COVID-19 knows no slogan. Aina pamberi panotova nerufu. Aina chinja, ukatochinjwa nochinjwa upinzwa mguwa. We want to make sure that we stop this sloganeering and focus on oneness. Let us not celebrate each other's death. We are one people. Those who like to trade insults, let's trade ideas. Let's stop grandstanding and stand on our knees. Stand on our knees to pray. Stand on our knees to ask for God's providence. It is not time for us to score cheap political points. I also, in this regard, appeal to the international community to save the country's health sector, to help the people of Zimbabwe. The sector has been struggling even before the pandemic. Pandemic has brought some serious challenges. We need to be supported. And donors, business people, tycoons, well-wishers, benefactors, come and help us. Zimbabwe in the diaspora, assist us, help us. Fellow countrymen, we must weather the storm together. Our best medical brains must be deployed to lead in the fight against this global pandemic. You know that we did deal with the pandemic of the HIV prevalence, and we managed to contain the pandemic. If we listen and allow our experts to guide us, we'll get far. I also encourage the nation to follow the guidelines and protocols that we have been given to reduce the spread of this pandemic. Let me say this, and this is our message to our bishops, our pastors, our prophets, our church board, and intercessors, our believers, those who believe, Christian believers, and of others of different faiths. We encourage you to continue to stand in the gap to pray for our nation. We must stand in prayer with those who have been affected by the pandemic. And may the Holy Spirit comfort all the families of those who have lost their loved ones. I join you, citizens, to be vigilant, resilient, as you work together, as we work together to wage and win the struggle against the COVID pandemic. We have won struggles before. We have waged struggles before. In the past, we had to win a hard-won liberation struggle. Together, we will win. Together, we win. Together, we weather the storm. Together, we have all the answers to our problems. Together, we are one people. Together, we are a people that is determined to win. Together, we are able to go far. Together, we are able to achieve and scale these heights of glory. Let us make sure that as one people, we remain so. We are one people from the beginning of time, but we are always divided by politics and politicians. Let us make sure that we run away from those artificial differences, those artificial demarcations brought about by false partisan divisions, and be one to make sure that we are a different people. We are a health people. As you know, a health nation is always a productive nation. A health people are always a source of victory, support, and the success of a great nation. It is our patriotic duty. It is your patriotic duty to encourage to mask up, to encourage to make sure we avoid super spreader events. Young people don't infect our elderly. The elderly don't move unnecessarily. Young people, stop big gatherings. Listen to medical advice. Listen to the advice of your leadership, the advice of your leaders in the communities, at the various levels, our traditional leaders, also the leadership that will be coming to you at various church levels. Fellow Zimbabweans, when we are united, there is no problem that we can solve. We are one and united. We always defeat any problem. Let us be together in one. Let us all understand that from Zambezi to Limpopo, let us understand that we are one people with one vision, with one nation. Let us always, for a better and for a greater Zimbabwe, work together. A new great Zimbabwe is possible. May God bless you. May God bless you. May God bless Zimbabwe. May God bless Africa. I love you. Thank you for listening. Be COVID-free. Always sanitize. Mask up. Always exercise social distance. But above all, remember to say a prayer. Remember to fast for our nation. Together, we'll do it. I thank you.